This video is going to be about what I have learned about the Bible and my current understanding of what exactly it is. When I used to read the Bible, I would look at it from a modern person's perspective. So when I read Genesis chapter 1, I thought of it as this is describing an actual creation of the universe. And I think it is. I still think it is actually describing what God did. But that almost doesn't matter. It almost doesn't matter that it means a literal creation. Of course, it's important to us because we have a science perspective. We view things in a science way. If something is being described, a process is being described in the earth, we think of that as being a literal process. And when something is incorrect, we either think that it's fiction or the author that wrote whatever that was didn't know what they were talking about. The problem is the ancient Israelites did not view things in this scientific perspective. They didn't view things as in, if I say that the mountains hold up the sky, that actually means that the mountains hold up the sky, literally. It doesn't matter if the mountains hold up the sky or not. It doesn't matter if the sky is a dome or not. It doesn't matter if there's a pool of water underneath the earth that's been there ever since creation. It doesn't matter. From a scientific perspective, that could all be false, and you could prove that to the Israelites, and they could accept that it's not scientifically true and still believe it. So if they're not believing it scientifically, how are they believing it? They're believing in it functionally. So functionally, there is a pool of water under the earth. Functionally, mountains do hold up the sky because whenever you go on mountains, you get divine revelation. Functionally speaking, that is true. And truth doesn't have to be scientific fact. It doesn't have to be historical fact. It doesn't have to be a material truth, like it's actually scientifically true. Fiction can be true, and these religious ideas can also be true. So looking at the Bible from this modern materialistic scientific perspective is not how the ancient Israelites would have read it, and it's not how the author intended for it to be read. And why would you read a book not in the way that the author intended for it to be read and then judge the author of the book because they don't know what they're talking about? If you read the Bible as the Bible was supposed to be read by the ancient Israelites, and I'm talking about the Old Testament, if you read it how it was supposed to be read and how it was intended to be read, there's very little about it that you could say that is wrong. Of course, atheists and materialists and scientists who are atheists would still say that God isn't real, although he is real functionally. Now, I'm not saying that when the Bible says God is real, and when the Bible says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, it's only speaking functionally. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that it's both. It's both scientific fact and reality, and it is also metaphorical and functional truth. So with that knowledge in mind, how do we know how the author wanted us to read the Bible? Well, we can infer it based off of what he said. So in the book of Genesis, there are a few things that happen that are quite strange and that we are unfamiliar with. So the flood account, for example, scientifically speaking, it's been quite difficult to explain how exactly this thing could have happened at all. Now, of course, we Christians can just say, oh, well, God did it, and so God can do anything. And it's like, yes. But a flood like that is something interesting because scientifically speaking, maybe there are some scientific reasons as to why we would think that's not true. But the Israelites wouldn't care. They wouldn't care if you could scientifically disprove that the flood would ever happen. It doesn't matter. Because to them, it serves a purpose other than history. Other than just simply, this happened in history. I saw it happen. Now, I do think the flood actually happened. But what the flood tells us, the flood does not tell us a historical event that happened and that's it. The flood story is written down in the book of Genesis to explain to us who God is and what he does in certain circumstances. And that's the entirety of the Bible. The Bible is not a history book. The Bible is not a scientific book. It's not a physics book. It's not a mathematics book. The Bible is a who is God book. And what is God doing? What is he going to do? What has he done? That's the difference. You cannot look at this from a scientific, materialistic perspective and expect to gain the same knowledge and information that the ancient Israelites would have had reading the exact same book. You've got to read it from a biblical perspective, which can be thousands of years ago, and not a modern perspective. So that's what I've learned about the Bible. When you read the Bible and any other old book, you've got to read it in the way that the author intended for it to be read, and not in a way that you want to read it in order to answer your own questions and read it in a way that aligns with your own personal beliefs.